everybody can hear me. Nobody seems to be on yet anyway, so let's see what happens. Well, it's been a while since I've done one of these. I am, can you hear me? Okay, great. It's been a while since I've done one of these. There's so many updates since the last time. I actually don't even know where to start. I'm waiting for Ray to join in. So I guess I will just do kind of an open chat until that time. If anybody has any particular questions, move right ahead. I will start by saying that continuing to do CBDC workshops across the country. We are scheduling 17 of them. You can go to daylightfreedom.org to see what we're currently planning. The next CBDC workshop is scheduled for September the 8th in Nashville. We're going to be sending around the sign-up page shortly. And the good news with that event is we're actually going to have Catherine Austin Fitz joining for part of it. So that's going to be an exciting event. And the CBDC threat is actually probably worse now than it was before. I think in part because of all of this election stuff that's going on. I think there's now a false sense of complacency about CBDCs because you are hearing these politicians talk about anti-CBDC bills or making anti-CBDC statements in front of the media. I'm going to be doing an article on this for the Brownstone Institute. I'm finishing up another article before that one on tokenization and something called the Great Taking, which I encourage everybody to look into this. If you're not familiar with the Great Taking by David Webb, I encourage you to look that up. There's a YouTube video about it. You can also get the PDF of the book for free. But in short, basically, we don't own the stocks, bonds, and 401ks in our retirement accounts. Essentially, we have signed away our rights and our ownership to these investment instruments over the years by design. And what that means is in the event of a financial collapse, we won't get ownership of those shares. The shares will actually go to the secured creditor. And it ultimately will end up going to the largest banks. And so this is how we get to you will own nothing and be happy. This is actually kind of an intentional thing that they've been putting in place for quite some time. And so this ties directly into CBDCs. So CBDCs are obviously government-controlled, centralized digital money. But the way they're rolling out CBDCs is going to be with something called a regulated liability network. And a regulated liability network is a platform where you have to register your tokens. So you will have to register your stocks and bonds, real estate, everything with all the know your customer stuff. So all of your assets will be identified on a register tied to CBDCs, and multiple third parties will be able to monitor these assets, program these assets, and censor these assets. So CBDCs are just the tip of the iceberg. They're actually digitizing all assets. Money is just one type of asset, and putting it all on one platform that can be centrally regulated. So I'm finishing up an article about that, and I'm going to be doing a lot moving forward on tokenization, because this is quite frightening. But if you've been following the political stuff and you're like, oh, Trump said he's against CBDCs, RFK says he's against CBDCs. I will say not to get your hopes up. And the reason why is it's very important to actually read the legislation that is being drafted in Congress. There are a number of bills that have been drafted across a wide range of things. Blockchain, you even have an anti-CBDC bill. You have Cynthia Loomis who just spoke at this Bitcoin conference, has drafted a couple of times various pieces of legislation. And you can't be fooled by the titles of these bills because the titles generally, it's kind of like the Patriot Act. Well, the Patriot Act it has nothing to do with patriotism. It has everything to do with increasing the surveillance state and taking away people's rights. And so the same thing is true with these blockchain bills. We had one blockchain bill, which basically gives control over US blockchain policy to the Secretary of Commerce. Well, Biden currently has an executive order out authorizing the exploration of a CBDC and a whole of government approach to regulating digital assets. His head of commerce is a member of the Trilateral Commission and is a big proponent of technocracy and globalism. So to give that person control over blockchain policy, that's not a win if you're interested in freedom. That does nothing to anyone that wants to engage in voluntary trade. It does nothing for anybody that's interested in self-custody crypto. It does nothing positive. I mean, on the flip side, it actually is going to lead to more regulation, more tracking, and more centralization of control. Additionally, you'll see a lot of these bills. Every time a politician says, well, we're going to put forward clarity. Trump even said that. In the first 100 days, he's going to pass legislation that provides clarity with respect to crypto policy. Well, the problem with this is that it does provide clarity. It provides clarity that we don't necessarily want or need. The clarity that it provides actually generally takes away rights. It adds reporting requirements. It moves to eliminate privacy. That's what they're adding. We're not going to find in this 100 days of legislation anything that actually supports what we're trying to do. And the way that I know this is by actually reading the bills that Cynthia Loomis has put together. She spoke at that Bitcoin conference. She spoke about putting forward this legislation. She is very clearly the person, because she spoke right around Trump, that is heading up the charge in the United States Senate for drafting United States crypto policy. And so what is her stance? If you read it, her stance is she is completely anti-privacy coins. She has explicitly stated, and I've shared memes about this, that she only believes in public, fully transparent blockchains. She has stated, and she has put in her bills, that she wants more stringent KYC, AML. She wants more constraints on crypto exchanges. She talks about giving exclusivity to US financial institutions and banks for stablecoins, outright banning algorithmic stablecoins. And so I want to explain this because I think it's a very important point to say about CBDCs. Trump could say he's against CBDCs. RFK could say he's against CBDCs. And they could still honor their commitment, and yet we will still get effectively CBDCs by giving banks complete monopoly control over stablecoins. So there's not much difference. And I think this is a big misconception that people have about CBDCs in general. A lot of people have said to me, well, CBDCs are never going to happen because, two things. One, the government is incompetent. And two, the banks don't want it because a CBDC will basically put banks out of business. People will have accounts directly with the Federal Reserve, which will basically disintermediate and get rid of banks. None of that is true. So first of all, the government isn't building a CBDC. The CBDC, particularly the one in the United States, was funded by the wealthiest banks through the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. And they've been working with some of the smartest development talent in the world through MIT, including some people involved with Bitcoin, most specifically Bitcoin core developer Corey Fields. So Corey Fields worked on SegWit, he worked on Lightning Network, and he is a co-author of the US retail CBDC project called Project Hamilton. You can look this up. His name is literally on the white paper itself. So if you think that, oh, well, the technology won't work, understand that they've actually started working on CBDCs in the United States as early as 2015, and they got really engaged around 2019. So they're actually 5 years into this. The US retail CBDC can actually already handle 1.8 million transactions per second. So we're already well along the path to having a CBDC that technically already works. And the way that these CBDCs are rolled out, it's not that you're going to have an account with the Federal Reserve. It's going to use the same model that we have right now. The Federal Reserve will issue CBDCs to the banks, and then the banks will continue to do the lending and mortgages and all of the activities that they're currently involved with. That's how CBDCs have been rolled out so far. That's how China has rolled out CBDCs. And when you look at the 134 countries that are at various stages of researching, demoing, piloting CBDCs, that is the model that they've all taken. I have yet to see an example where banks are being eliminated and people are working directly with the the Federal Reserve or the central bank in their country. Now, so if we know what the Republicans are doing is putting forward legislation to give monopoly control over stablecoins to banks, then yes, you could technically not have the central bank issuing the CBDCs. You could have the banks themselves issuing the CBDCs in the form of stablecoins. Because what are stablecoins? Stablecoins are a digital, programmable form of money. All of the things that people worry about and are concerned about with respect to CBDCs, the programmability, the ability to determine when and if you can actually use the currency, the ability to censor, all of the things that people are concerned about with, can you hear me? It was weird. It just cut out on the mic. I've never actually gotten that particular error before. Anyway, everything that people are concerned about with CBDCs could be implemented technically and programmatically with stablecoins. So while Trump on the one hand is out there saying, yes, I'm against CBDCs, they're equally pushing policies that are pro stablecoin. So I say this because there's no reason for people to be complacent about this. It is government policy on the Democrat side to push CBDCs. That's Biden's current policy through Executive Order 14067. And it is the Republican policy in the bills that they've drafted, because there are multiple bills, to give control to the banks through stablecoins. And most of the legislation, you look at the stuff that Warren Davidson's involved in and all these other things, they are giving more control to the banks. And so, again, even this whole idea of allowing banks to be custodians of crypto. So there was a bill put forward to get rid of some SEC language that prevented banks from providing crypto custody services. And, frankly, I was against that bill just because I don't think any bank should be. The whole point of crypto is to engage in peer-to-peer commerce without banks. The whole point of this is to separate money and state. Once you start giving more control to the banks, what you're going to find at the end of this is all of a sudden we've gone from banks can custody crypto for people to you can only use a bank to custody crypto, and banning self-custody outright. And historically speaking, that is how this kind of thing will work. So trying to make the claim that, well, banks being able to offer custodian services is a step towards freedom is incongruent with the facts of how this stuff generally works and trends. So that is currently the situation. So we're either going to get effectively CBDCs through CBDCs directly or through stable coins. And there is a huge anti-privacy bias with Republicans and Democrats. So I'm not saying that this is just Republicans are against privacy, but what Republicans always use is this whole terrorism and money laundering card. And so you could see the ways in which Republicans would end up pushing and supporting stable coins or even CBDCs. They'd either use the illegal immigration and we're not collecting taxes, or they would use the cyber attack or terrorist threat or money laundering threat, even though in reality, as we all know, overwhelmingly fiat currency is used for these things. And it's usually state actors that are the ones that are behind things like drug dealing and terrorism. I mean, there really isn't a rampant outbreak of random individuals out there engaging in this type of activity. It's almost always state sponsored. And so I think people need to be very concerned about this. And so for me, there's been a shift. The last podcast that I did, the focus was on the DEF CON 1 building an open source wallet and point of sale system as a solution, because as I go around the country onboarding people and saying, listen, the solution to CBDCs isn't going to happen through Congress. It's going to be by starting to use alternative currencies. I've actually started using Cake Wallet. So I don't see a need to have to build a wallet for right now. If you haven't used Cake Wallet, I encourage you to check it out. It works with Monero, Bitcoin Cash, a variety of other coins. It has a very user-friendly interface, and you can actually buy debit cards and gift cards. There's a thing called Cake Pay built right into it. So for me, I've actually started using it personally, and I think it's an easy way to onboard people because it handles multiple cryptos, but more specifically, from the very beginning, they've had an emphasis on Monero and privacy. They will also soon be integrating Zano, which I think is quite possibly one of the most important technologies out there for stopping CBDCs and this great taking concept. And so again, this great taking concept is we already don't own the stocks and bonds and 401ks legally. They've already done that kind of behind the scenes by changing the laws at the state level. But once they tokenize our stocks and bonds and put it on this platform with CBDCs, then they'll be able to, at a click of a mouse button, basically transfer our assets in a financial emergency. And so the alternative to that is to have privacy tokens, to be able to tokenize your own assets and trade them anywhere in the world. And it's about not only owning your assets, but it's about owning the information about the assets yourself. So do you own the asset and have privacy, or do we go the path that they're going with CBDCs and regulated liability network, which is we actually don't own the assets. They're controlled by multiple third parties, and the information about our transactions is either publicly available, or if not publicly available, it's known to multiple third parties and is subject to all of the same corruption that the current system has. And so I actually think that privacy tokens are an absolutely critical part of this, which is why I have been doing a lot of experimentation with Zano and even just trying it and using it. So if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to check it out and use it. You can download a wallet. You can actually create your own token in about 30 seconds. It costs about 3.5 cents to create a token. You can actually trade tokens with people right from within the wallet. There's no need to use a third party. As somebody that's been involved with tokenization since 2018, I can say this is hands down the cutting edge for being able to do tokenization and trade privately anywhere in the world. So I just want to throw that out there. And again, I'm waiting for Ray. I hope I don't have I might have a time zone issue here. I don't know what's going on with that. So I'm just kind of giving everybody an update on the point of sale system. I'm still pursuing that as well. And in fact, it ties into Zano, because what I think that we ultimately need is, in order to be able to, they're going to roll out CBDCs in an emergency. So the way to be able to stop that is we have to be able to onboard not everybody, but enough people that we can actually get an alternate economy going. And there isn't any single coin. I know a lot of people are going to be in the comments, and a lot of people like to push maximalism, and I'm not a maxi at all. And I'm not even aspiring to be, because I know what we need to have is enough combined transaction power in terms of transactions per second and enough buying power to be able to run a real alternative, so that when people are faced with an emergency, when they're told either jump on CBDCs or lose all your money, we actually can say, well, no, here, use this. This is an easy to use system. It works with multiple assets. It works with multiple privacy coins. It works with gold and silver. And what I'm exploring now is the ability to actually privately tokenize gold and silver. So here's the thing. So if you've ever seen these, so I'm holding up a gold back. This is 1/1000th of an ounce of gold, which I think is actually a pretty amazing kind of breakthrough for gold, because, inevitably when you say to somebody, well, we should stop using fiat, we should start using alternatives, gold, silver, crypto. Somebody says, they always say, well, what am I going to do? Peel off, shave off gold and go and buy a loaf of bread at the store. And the truth is they've actually solved that with gold backs. So I use these gold backs all the time. I almost always tip with gold backs, and I'm constantly handing these out, and everybody instantly gets it. And so if I go to a store, or if I get my hair cut and I tip the barber with a gold back, then once they have this gold back in their possession, nobody knows. It's anonymous. Nobody knows that they have it. It's not tracked in any way, shape, or form. Now I can log onto an online account for Goldback, and I can buy Goldbacks and silver and everything else, but all of it is tracked in a database. And so the online version of and it's not tokenized, it's just a centralized database, but the online version of me using Goldbacks and silver and gold is still tracked. It's not anonymous. It doesn't have these privacy features. And so you could use something like Zano to privately tokenize Goldbacks. So the Alpine company who makes these could use privacy tokens instead of a centralized database. And then that would allow people to be able to trade using the tokenized version of it. And then if and when you needed to do physical redemption, you could. And there are a variety of different ways that you could do that. You could either do that through Alpine themselves, or they even now make Goldback ATMs. So in the future, you could potentially have a card, an NFC card. It's not a debit card, but it's a card for touch by pay. You could approach a Goldback ATM that has your tokenized gold on it, go up to the machine, and then actually receive physical Goldbacks. So this is a way to actually preserve privacy for even tokenized assets, gold and silver. And there are things to work out behind the scenes. But what I'm saying is I've been working on behind the scenes trying to figure out how to get the right, a good combination of alternatives so we can bridge precious metals and privacy coins. And so this is where I've been putting a lot of my emphasis, is looking at these alternatives on the privacy side. So you have Bitcoin Cash with Cash Fusion, Litecoin with Mimblewimble, you have Monero, you have Zcash, you have Zano. So you have Pirate Chain. So there are a whole variety of options. And I just want to be clear, because I seem to get into arguments with this all of the time. A lot of people can't conceive of the idea that somebody works with multiple cryptocurrencies. So if I'm talking about one specific currency, so every time I talk about something, I'm not necessarily going to reference every asset that you could use. I might want to talk about, oh, here's how I did this one thing today. I tokenized this asset today with Zano, or I bought movie tickets for my kids using Monero and the Cake Wallet. That doesn't mean that those are the only things that I'm using. And so it seems to be that people are very eager to pigeonhole people. Whenever you talk about one coin, you're automatically a maxi, and that's it. So to make it clear, that's not my approach. I don't believe in anytime soon there is a single coin that can do it all. If there is, then the marketplace will dictate that. I'm not saying I'm against it happening. I'm just saying that it's not technically feasible based on how many transactions can be processed and what the buying power is at this point in time. So I will always be promoting a combination of assets, and I will always be experimenting with things. And some things will work and some things won't. So the thing that I'm committed to is trying these things. And I will state that I live on these alternative assets. So for me, this isn't about speculating. I'm not trying to optimize my conversion to fiat currency. I actually need things that I can use to buy things and to pay bills. And so that's the lens through which I'm looking at this. And so let's see, let me ping. Let me see if I can, I'm going to send a quick message to Ray. I'm also going to say, and if anybody has any questions, because this is just kind of me riffing right now while we're waiting for Ray. So if anybody has any questions or comments, go ahead. I do want to talk about this Bitcoin conference, because I made the conscious decision last week to post a lot during the Bitcoin conference, and I specifically around a lot of the material and hijacking Bitcoin, because unfortunately Roger's not able to be publicly out there talking about what happened to Bitcoin. And so right now, we have millions of people all around the world that are hearing presidential candidates and people talk about Bitcoin without any understanding of the history of Bitcoin. And I know a lot of you are probably, I mean, I can tell from even the comments, I mean, you know, a lot of you are already in privacy coins, and you're probably really deep into this and have been involved with crypto for many, many years. But I've now traveled to 22 states, and I will tell you that a couple of things. One, last month, only 0.4% of Americans made a purchase using cryptocurrency. There's actually a decline in the use of cryptocurrency as money. And that's tragic, because we actually need something that can be a replacement or an alternative to CBDCs. But nevertheless, that's where we are right now. People are not using these things. And as I talk to people outside of the echo chamber, outside of crypto or the Liberty community, most people aren't even aware that you can or ever could use crypto as money. Most people actually only think of Bitcoin as a speculative investment. It never occurred to them that they could use it to buy things. This is the majority of Americans, and these aren't stupid people, and these are not like these are actually people that just kind of, you know, they saw whatever the mainstream narrative of it was, and they've kind of avoided all of it. And so this is a real struggle that we're up against. And so I wanted to get a lot of that material out there last week to explain to people what happened with Bitcoin, to explain who's now behind Bitcoin. Roger's book goes up to 2017, and then my book goes kind of after that. And it's very clear that the people that promoted this digital gold narrative and promoted and funded the changes to Bitcoin to keep it slow and expensive also funded all 3 US CBDC pilots. And then when you look beyond that, who's involved, you have Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, you have Jack Dorsey from, you know, Twitter, and his, you know, with all of his involvement with the censorship industrial complex. You have Michael Saylor, who I put out a post yesterday. I mean, and this guy has been involved with the CIA and with intelligence agencies for years. And so, you know, this is not what people think that it is. People are talking about it as freedom money, but it's very clearly the case at this point that it is a surveillance coin. It is a public ledger. It is people can see the transactions, and most people, I understand that there are things that you can do to protect your privacy on Bitcoin, and almost no one does it. And new people that are coming on board don't have the capacity or the interest in doing those steps. That's not feasible. So it's one of these things where you often get into, or I'll get into arguments with people, and their position is, well, here, I know how to do this. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Money is for everyone, and privacy should be for everyone. You shouldn't have as a requirement to use money 140 IQ and 15 years of programming experience. So it's not really relevant to me that, you know, a handful of people can do this. But even when you look back on it, Ross Ulbricht, Ian Freeman, Roger, people that were OGs in this space, people who are very intelligent in this space, have certainly been subject to chain analysis and the application of AI to chain analysis. And this is something that is going on now at large scale. So Bitcoin is a surveillance coin. It's slow and it's expensive. But for me, I'm outright horrified by what went on at that conference. The idea that we're going to use, first of all, coins that were largely seized through civil asset forfeiture. So what Trump talked about was building a strategic Bitcoin reserve based on what I would say is the product of theft, the product of civil asset forfeiture. And I'm doing an article on this. I'm kind of digging into, well, where did these 200,000 Bitcoin come from? Because they didn't go out in the open. They're not mining Bitcoin. They didn't go out on the open market and buy these on Coinbase. These are cryptos that they seized, and they seized these cryptos from sophisticated people. So one of the arguments that I hear from somebody, well, yes, you know, they can't get my seed phrase. As long as I just memorize these 12 words, they're never going to be able to get my money. Well, okay, there are a lot of people sitting in cages right now. And there are people, these are people that are committed to liberty. And these are people that are smart and generally have some level of OPSEC going on. And when chain analysis is used and their identity is determined, then the state comes to them and says very simply, okay, yeah, you cannot turn over your private keys, and we will throw you in a cage until you do. So I mean, at the end of the day, the argument that, well, you know, they can't get into my head is a little consolation. So what is your big argument that, well, yeah, I'm in a cage, but at least I'm keeping Bitcoin out of circulation? I mean, is this the big argument and the big win about your self-ownership of Bitcoin? The truth is, in my opinion, is as long as it's not private, do you really own it? And I actually would argue that you don't. I believe if your identity can be outed, you can be blacklisted, you can be thrown in a cage, and you can be tagged. Do you really own that? So, I mean, it's certainly better perhaps than fiat, but I don't know, arguably not much. So the idea that what we're doing now is we're using confiscated coins as the basic of a strategic reserve, and then they're using taxpayer theft to buy and acquire 1 million Bitcoin. This to me is about as anti-liberty as it gets. I mean, we've gone to the point where you can talk about all the debates that we're having in crypto. You can go through small blocks. You can go through, is it digital cash or is it digital gold? And I certainly have my opinion on that, which is, my position is we need a replacement for CBDCs. Even if it is digital gold, then what are we going to do about digital cash? But even if you buy digital gold, the idea that we should use the force and violence of the state to force taxpayers to buy this asset to pump people's bags is it's violence, and it's theft. And so it's kind of horrifying to me now to see supposed liberty people now defend this, because let's make a few things very clear. And I've been doing a lot of analysis on this as well. They're not going to back the dollar by Bitcoin. That's not even what it means. If you buy 1 million Bitcoin, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden the dollar is backed by it. At some point, the dollar used to be backed by gold, and the deal was you were able to exchange a certain number of dollars for actual gold. There was a redemption mechanism. Buying 1 million Bitcoin and putting it in the strategic reserve does not give you access to Bitcoin. There's no mechanism that says, okay, well, now you can go in and exchange these things, where the entirety of the currency is now backed by Bitcoin. That's not what's being proposed. That's not actually how it's going to work. So at the end of the day, it's literally just a government that is $35 trillion in debt, speculating on an asset that's slow, expensive, and can be surveilled as a Hail Mary, what they say, to help pay down the debt and to make America competitive. I find that to be probably a false argument, that it won't even serve that purpose. And I also find it to be a major conflict of interest, that the people that are the people drafting this legislation, Cynthia Lummis, owns Bitcoin. Trump owns Bitcoin. So we literally have now presidential candidates, U.S. senators drafting legislation to use taxpayer money to pump their bags. This is absurd. So I'm completely opposed to it, obviously, and I just again, there's not a political solution out of this, but I actually think that these developments in the last week or so are probably the worst that I've seen this year. Because even when you look at it and you say, well, yeah, Biden's got an executive order and everything else. Well, now we're looking at a situation where what our best case scenario is, and this is what Bitcoin maxis are hoping for, Republicans win. They enhance KYC AML. They put in laws that make privacy coins more difficult to use or buy. And then they use taxpayer money to buy one particular asset that's slow and expensive, that can't be used as an alternative to CBDCs. And this is what the best case, this is the freedom choice. This is the this is the Valhalla. This is what people have been working towards. That doesn't get us any closer to freedom. That doesn't solve the United States' monetary crisis. It doesn't prevent CBDCs. It doesn't do anything to promote free trade in the United States or anywhere in the world. So I am going to write quite a bit about this because I think this needs to be put in perspective. And again, I'm not making voting there's no better option here. It always was about exiting the system and starting to use these alternatives. But I think the one thing that's come out of it for me is, and I wasn't this way even 60 days ago. But I think privacy by default is going to become extremely important. And so that's going to be a big part of what I'm trying to introduce people to is privacy. And from my perspective, I'm immersing myself into it more. I see a question here about Monero supply. I don't know the answer to that. I'm actually kind of just digging into this now. So some of this stuff I'm going to be, I thought Monero had a fixed supply increase, but I don't know how to answer that question specifically. So there's a lot to look into here, and we'll be doing that. So again, I recommend that you check out daylightfreedom.org to take a look at the workshops. And if you want a workshop in your area, fill out the form. I want to do as many of these as possible. And I actually even feel a greater sense of urgency, specifically because people are complacent and aren't aware of the things that I've just been stating here. And I think that the BTC rhetoric is even ramping up more. It's kind of it's very hard to see. And I'm looking forward to talking to this with Ray. I'm hoping, if not today, then perhaps we'll reschedule this. So those are really the big developments, and I have a lot more interviews lined up all over the place and speaking engagements. And so any ideas that you have or any other podcasts or speaking opportunities, please let me know. I do think that it's urgent to start sharing this information and onboarding people as quickly as possible. It's still DEFCON 1. If anything, it's you can't go more hardcore than that. But the status has not changed at all. It's just that we now have to work through more propaganda, and now we have politicians pushing a completely different narrative. And so now we have Trump selling $500 Bitcoin sneakers. I mean, this has gotten to be just kind of out of control. So does anybody have any questions or topics you want me to cover? At some point, I'll probably do this for another, I'll probably stay on here for another 10, 15 minutes. Just in case, I'll go till the top of the hour and see if Ray joins. And if not, then we'll reschedule. I see a link here for Get Monero auditability. I will talk a little bit more about Zano. So Roger introduced me to it, and I originally looked at it and I was kind of like, it's a hybrid proof of work and proof of stake. And I always had this negative opinion about proof of stake. And there's something that has really changed, at least for me conceptually, in the last 90 days. We're so used to referencing everything to Bitcoin. But really, I kind of like, well, maybe we should focus instead on, well, what is the outcome that we are looking for, as opposed to how does it compare to Bitcoin? Because there are problems with Bitcoin, as I think most of us now know, and some of it is not only technical, but a lot of it has been in the way in which development has occurred and changes have taken place in the system, specifically related to the funding of developers. And so when I looked into this, it's not proof of stake in the way that Ethereum is proof of stake. It is a hybrid model where the combination of the proof of work and the proof of stake actually gives better security than you would get through the individual choices. And the proof of stake, one of the problems with proof of stake is you have concentration. You generally have, these larger nodes that have more and more control, and they can also be identified. So they could be targets for, the state or other nefarious actors. And if you are somebody that is staking and you have a large amount, you are now subject to being targeted. They've actually built something where there's privacy built in even as proof of stake. So you can't actually find out how many coins anyone is actually staking, which is a huge advantage to this model. And also the way that the coins are distributed, it's kind of uses a probabilistic model. So, I mean, in theory, you could have one Zano and still, at some point it will pay off and you'll actually hit some as they're distributed. So I actually have come to think that this is an even better model for a variety of reasons. And so that was one of my first pieces of skepticism. The other was around, they did a pre-mine, and I was always like, oh, pre-mines are awful. And a lot of pre-mines have gotten a bad name because they deserve to have a bad name, because people pre-mined and then they left and they took the coins and they didn't do anything with them. They didn't build anything. But I don't think that means that pre-mine is inherently bad. I think the applications of it have been bad. But when I look at what happened to Bitcoin, look, there's a reality to this, which is that somebody is paying these developers. None of these developers are actually working for free. That's not, there's this religion around open source that somehow developers doing things for free and people are auditing code for free. And that's not the case. And that's certainly not the case with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin didn't have a pre-mine. And then let's look at what happened. It had the Bitcoin Foundation, which was a community project that funded developers. And then it had issues on its own. And then all of a sudden we find out that there are deep state actors, people involved in the intelligence community funding things, like Replace by Fee was funded by somebody that was tied to the intelligence community. When Bitcoin Foundation was no longer funding Bitcoin development, MIT took over. So this is the same MIT that and Joy Ito, who took money from Epstein, who funded all 3 US CBDC pilots, and through his venture fund funded SegWit and Lightning. So again, there's no free. And so the consequences in this case of not having a pre-mine is that we end up having a whole bunch of people who we don't know their motivations funding these developers. And as we look at it now, people like Reid Hoffman, Peter Thiel, Saylor, others, the people that are behind it are not necessarily people that we would associate with decentralization, privacy, and freedom. And so that's just the reality of it. And so in the case of Zano, they have what's called an auditable wallet. And so you can actually see what's being spent, and it's been around for 5 years. So that's no longer an issue for me with Zano, but it's also not an issue for me in general conceptually. I no longer now just say, well, if it doesn't have every attribute that Bitcoin has, then it must be bad. And I think in part of that is because when I look at Bitcoin, the outcome isn't great. So I just wanted to chime in on that and say, I'm going to be putting out a lot of material where I'm showing the use cases of tokenization. And this article that I'm finishing up right now goes into this in great detail, and I'll highlight just a quick overview of what's in there. So everything that we buy, before I go into that, we've given away most of our rights by signing these click wrap agreements. Every time you get a piece of software, you get some, you use Microsoft Windows. There's a 70-page legal agreement that you sign when you click accept the terms and conditions. The average person signs 150 click wrap agreements each year. And if you actually count up the number of words and the number of pages in those agreements on the high end, if you looked at the largest case scenario, it would take somebody 16.6 days of straight reading just to read all of the click wrap terms and conditions for everything that we sign up for. So we're talking about banking agreements, software, you name it. Like, we are inundated almost, every other day. We are signing without even thinking about it and without reading it, agreements that give away our data, our privacy, our rights, and often our ownership. Most of commerce works through databases, through centralized databases. When we buy and sell anything, when we do any kind of trade, there's usually a transaction that takes place in a database, and where the ownership is recorded in a database. And most of these databases are centralized. And being centralized databases, they're subject to hacking and fraud and corruption. And then there are usually a whole series of, middlemen, lawyers, and other groups kind of surrounding these databases in the way that these transactions take place in the current system. So often when I say tokenization, somebody will say to me, who cares about tokenization? We don't need tokenization. Or what they'll say is, well, let's look at what tokenization means in crypto. Tokenization means NFTs, or it means meme coins, where somebody creates a token called hot dog, and the whole purpose of it is to drive the price to $1.50 because that's what Costco charges, and that's it. There's no business. It's literally just gambling, and I think in many respects that's what most people think tokenization is. But that's not what tokenization is. Tokenization is actually, going back to this database idea, everything will be tokenized. Every asset will be tokenized. And tokenized for being traded and tracked. This is what is built into the Regulated Liability Network CBDC pilot, which, by the way, not only the US is doing, other countries are building regulated liability networks, and they're building regulated liability networks that connect with one another. So what they're essentially building is countries are building their own CBDCs and asset tokenization platforms that are integrated and that communicate with other countries' CBDCs and tokenization platforms. What that means is they are building a global system for the tokenization and control of all assets and all digital money. So that is happening whether we like it or not. So what I would say is, if you don't like tokenization or you don't see the use case, understand all of the assets are going to be tokenized, whether we like it or not. The only decision that we have in this process is whether or not we own those tokens and whether we own the information about those tokens. And I had touched on that earlier, but I think this is very important to know, because when you think about, well, what can be tokenized? Everything can be tokenized. The title to your car, your house, artwork, baseball cards, collectibles, information. You could even tokenize things that are not, on this planet. You can tokenize ownership of mineral rights on asteroids. Literally, and I've done some research on this. I put together like the top 50 different categories of things that are likely to be tokenized, and it's literally over $1 quadrillion. So this is the size of the asset tokenization opportunity. And so I'm going to be, over the next few weeks, actually tokenizing assets on Zano to show people how it works and to educate people on the fact that, oh wow, this is actually the basis of trade. Tokenization moving forward is the basis for trading everything. And in fact, money is itself a token, right? So money represents about 5% of global assets, and CBDCs are just tokenized money. So literally everything, including money, is tokenized. It's all in reality one thing. But in crypto, we generally focus on just the money part. And when we think about the tokens, we think about the tokens in terms of NFTs and memes. And we should be thinking about it in terms of the $1 quadrillion overall market size that is represented by everything that can be tokenized. And so you're going to see a lot of information from me about this, simply because I've been passionate about this. I have been tokenizing assets since 2018. I left politics completely, gave up on politics, because I actually saw the way forward, and the way of kind of working on alternatives was to use blockchain technology and tokenization to get rid of third parties in ways outside of just money into all of these other markets. And so this has been an area of passion of mine, and it is something that I'm going to be sending out a lot of information, because I think this is the key to stopping CBDCs and the great taking, is the ability for us to have a private system where we can trade anything. I see a question here. AstroTurfing, Bitcoin pack, or what exactly the source is, very shadowy. So I looked at this. So this is another thing. I do get frustrated online, in part because I did spend 30 years close to politics, 15 years as a hardcore activist, getting candidates elected and even running. And so I know this stuff kind of from the inside, and which is why I don't believe in it anymore. But I actually analyze these things. So there's a thing called the Fair Shake PAC that was started. This is a $200 million super PAC. And I went to the FEC website to research who is behind it and who's funding it. And the largest funders of this are Coinbase, A16Z Ventures, so Mark Andreessen and these guys, the Winklevoss twins. So it's VCs, it's a lot of the people that have not necessarily contributed. My personal opinion is venture capital has been a net liability for crypto. It's usually just pump and dumps. None of the Bitcoin has nothing to do with venture capital. Ethereum doesn't have anything to do with venture capital. The venture capitalists have usually come in and if anything, built things that are centralized and pushed towards regulation. Well, those are the people that have funded this Fair Shake PAC. All right. Well, so now everybody's sitting there saying, well, we're going to elect Trump. We're going to do all this stuff. Crypto is, we now have a seat at the table. The first candidate that they spent millions of dollars through this Fair Shake PAC supporting is Adam Schiff. And Adam Schiff is a Democrat out of California who was, and again, I don't pick sides. I don't support any of them, but he was very anti-Trump. And he's a very liberal member of the U.S. House of Representatives. And that's who this Fair Shake PAC supported. And they got him to win the primary in California. So he will likely become the next United States Senator from the state of California. Now, he came out with a pro-crypto stance, but again, pro-crypto in the, common sense regulation, probably, we need to have regulation for clarity, but not actually in the pro-crypto, I want privacy, self-custody, and the ability to engage in voluntary trade. So understand that's actually even what they mean. When they say it's a Bitcoin PAC or it's a pro-crypto PAC, their intent is different, I suspect, than the majority of the people that are on this call. Adam Schiff actually was on this White Men for Kamala Harris web thing or whatever that happened a couple of days ago. So he's a strong, active, vocal proponent and advocate for Kamala Harris. So this is the first person that this crypto PAC supported. PACs are usually a waste of money. I actually think it will have no impact at all. I've run super PACs and I'm familiar with how most of that works. I do not actually think, as much as people like to make a big deal about crypto, there really aren't that many single issue voters that are focused on crypto that are going to move the needle in an election. And in part, it's because when you research who owns crypto, they're mostly in states like California, Illinois, New York, and Texas. And so the people there, it's not like that you're going to switch enough votes in California or New York or Illinois. So it doesn't even matter. The single issue voters aren't in states where they actually will affect the aggregate outcome. So this whole crypto super PAC thing is going to be a giant waste of time. And everything that I've seen with these people in politics, the crypto people that get into politics, they're naive and have a almost like a junior high school civics level knowledge of what politics actually is. I mean, politics is actually more about leverage and blackmail than it is about, we're going to get our information out. We're going to run $100 million worth of ads. We're going to run ads in Times Square about Bitcoin. What those people aren't familiar with, because they haven't probably traveled the country, is most people actually don't like crypto. Most people have a negative look at crypto. So they're going to be out there pushing their, have fun staying poor, whatever the other narratives that they're going to have about crypto, not realizing that that's going to alienate more voters than it's probably going to bring on board. But on top of that, and this is true whether people want to believe it, and most people don't. The average voter, it has either no to low information. And when I say this isn't I'm not trying to be disrespectful like in a flippant way. Literally 2/3 of American voters can't identify the three branches of government. The level of knowledge about how government even works amongst the people who actually vote is at an all-time low. They've done reports on the average scores of students that have gone through civics and history, literally at all-time lows. I can't remember what the number was. I think the last survey of 8th graders was like a 20% pass rate. I think 20 or 30% pass rate. The majority of 8th graders literally failed the test, and so the voting population isn't sitting around watching political debates. They're not studying political policy. The way votes in this country, elections work, is it's all about what's called get out the vote. So there's the last 7 days before the election. And so what happens is the political parties, the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, they have huge databases, voter databases, and they have massive amounts of information, as much as 500 data points on each voter. So they know what your magazine subscriptions are. They've done all kinds of modeling on where you're likely to be on certain issues. And they will actually target mailers and social media ads based on that data. The Democrats have been better at this than the Republicans since 2008. And so when a lot of people say, well, Biden, he didn't get 81 million votes, I'm not saying that the elections have ever had integrity. You can go back to JFK and everything else. I'm not stating that there weren't shenanigans with the election process. But what I will say is the Democrats have a much better ability to target voters and to actually get voters to the polls. And that is based on data and media manipulation, and not based on the charisma of the candidate on TV, their performance in debates, or what the policies are. Because at the end of the day, if they're going to a nursing home and they're putting out flyers and they're saying, if you don't vote for this candidate, you're going to be out in the street and you're going to die. And then they come by with a van to take people to the polling place, that drives more votes than all of whatever goes on X and everything else. So this is why it's like I don't have confidence in the process, but I also think that the actions that these guys are taking, think about how $200 million. Think about what could be done with $200 million if you were investing in that to build open source point of sale systems that would incorporate multiple assets. What if that money and attention was spent on trying to work with other groups that have resonant values? There are people that in the food freedom movement, in the health freedom movement, there are a lot of people that have woken up because of COVID tyranny. And now they're starting to research things like what is the Federal Reserve as they look at what inflation has been like. And so these are people that were never in crypto. They've never touched a crypto in their life, but they know the government has crossed the line into tyranny, and they know the money's broken. Well, these are our people. These are the people that we should be bringing in. But so much of the technology is too hard to use. And then now we have to deal with fighting this narrative of people being introduced to crypto, not as something that you use as a currency, but as something that governments buy with taxpayer money. So we now actually have to, so as much as I would like to say, and people ask me, well, why do you even talk about Bitcoin? Why not just talk about the solutions and the things that you want to have built instead? And the answer is that in meeting people all around the country, this entire space is known and defined by Bitcoin and people's perception of Bitcoin. We can't avoid it. It has to be addressed. And so immediately it's like, oh, well, this is Bitcoin. So then you have to go in, that is the reference point that other people have. So if we don't have a way of effectively and quickly communicating what Bitcoin is and that it's been hijacked and what's possible, then we're not going to get people to even engage, to have a deeper level conversation. So that's the issue on that. I know I've been over an hour now. It looks like we may have the wrong day or whatever. I think he's in Dubai, and I think I scheduled this thing at I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So this might end up happening tomorrow. So, so somebody said Trump said he would protect self-custody in his Bitcoin speech. Yes. So here's the thing, self-custody, we have a definition of what self-custody is, but their definition of self-custody might mean that you can have your own crypto wallet at a bank, and they might call that self-custody. You have to understand that the terms that they use, so Trump first came out against CBDCs in New Hampshire, and this was in part based on my conversations with Vivek Ramaswamy, who read my book, who I had multiple conversations with. And so here's basically what happened. The Iowa caucuses finished, and Trump was still facing competition. New Hampshire is the most important primary in the presidential race, and he was competing against Nikki Haley and didn't know if he was going to win or not. Vivek knows that we have a big liberty community here. I'd gotten 17,000 votes when I ran for U.S. Senate, which is actually a lot of votes for New Hampshire, and that there's a big liberty group here. The chair of his campaign was Bruce Fenton. There were a lot of other people that are very pro-crypto, anti-CBDC. So Vivek went to Trump and said, look, come out and say you're against CBDCs, because when you heard him talk about it in that initial speech, it's unclear that he knows what a CBDC is. He just repeated a talking point. But then when you read some of the other stuff that he's put out regarding crypto, like he put out one thing and he's like, well, we need to make sure that we own all the Bitcoin, and that all the Bitcoin that are mined from here on out are made in America. This stuff is absolutely, I mean, like that. I look at this tweet and I'm like, there's nothing about this that makes sense. There's nothing about this that indicates an understanding of how the system works, how mining works, or even the fact that over 91% of the Bitcoin have already been mined. This was like a basic, he's trying to appeal to people on rah, America's going to be number one. We're going to own this, even though the statements that he's making about it don't tie to reality. So when he says self-custody wallet, the way I interpret self-custody wallet, knowing how slippery politicians are, is you can have your own crypto account and your own wallet through a bank, as opposed to having it in a pool through something like Fidelity or Bitcoin. Now, I will also add, this is important to know. When we talk about self-custody, the IRS is already putting rules in place where we're going to have to report our self-custody holdings. I mentioned this regulated liability network where we're going to have to register our assets, whether it's stock, bond. They're going to require us, based on the designs, and I don't believe, go to Regulated Liability Network, like Google it, go to their website. They have a white paper. They have all the information. This has the Federal Reserve Bank of New York behind it, the Bank for International Settlements, DTCC, 5 of the largest banks in New York. This is a well-funded thing with a lot of documentation around it. Their goal here is we're going to have to register and put our crypto assets on this ledger, our Bitcoin, our Ethereum, our stable coins, our tokenized stocks and bonds. Everything is supposed to go on this platform. So the steps that are being taken now is the IRS says you have to report your self-custody holdings. The next step is going to be, oh, you reported that you had X number of Bitcoin. Okay, well, now you have to register that on this platform. That literally, that's what's being designed, and the IRS has already put that into place. And so, so you got to understand, this is, so when I read through, and I'm going to do an article about this. It's been, I struggle with this. This is other article that I'm on. It's like 5,000 words already. The tough part is trying to figure out how to frame this, where there's a lot of material and I want to make it understandable. But there's so much to go through, because even just analyzing the legislation that the Republicans in the House put together, and how different what the bill says is from what the talking points are, you have to really like suss all that out and be able to articulate that in a way that people understand. But the bills are all more, oh, here he is. All right. Let me add Ray, are you there? Hello?
Hello.
Ray?
Yeah, what's up, brother?
Hey, you can hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. I don't know if I had the wrong time. I was going to bed right as we were scheduling this, so I don't know if I might have gotten the day wrong based on the time zones or whatever. So I hope we're good. Or is this good time?
Yeah, brother. Always got time for you, my man. Looking forward to this. You're one of the sharpest, keenest brothers in space with some big old balls. So let's do it.
Awesome. Well, I say the same about you as well. So, all right. Well, we're live. So I've been going for a little over an hour here. So we've got some people on. So I'm very excited to be able to do this. It's been awesome following you and watching what you're doing. I mean, you're a absolute beast in terms of like just everywhere throughout Africa, getting it done, onboarding people, getting people engaged in peer-to-peer commerce. It's a sight to see. So I'm really grateful you could join.
Honored to be here, brother.
Awesome. So I guess let's start. So what are you up to?
Well, my day job is I'm the CEO of No One's. I'm No One's CEO. No One's is a cryptocurrency platform, but it has far bigger aspirations than that. I don't like to use the word super app because it's not ambitious enough. I like to use the word network state. And it's a long battle, right? Like we're in the middle of the battle. We're trying to complete the peer-to-peer revolution, which began with the internet. And then we got mobile phones, and we disrupted nearly everything except money. Then we got peer-to-peer electronic cash. Then finally, we could go after the rails. Amazing. And we made some progress there, but nowhere near enough in the past 15 years. With the internet and mobile phones, we got various contenders for network state status. Facebook was the first one. Facebook, with 2 billion users, tried to become the world's first network state, right? They launched Libre, cryptocurrency platform that would have given them a payment system, but then they got shot down by the regulator, which a really keen, astute person should think about that. Why would the regulator shoot down one of their own companies that could control all these payments in the global south? Like, why would they do that? You think they'd want that to happen? And what I've come to understand is with 2 billion users especially across the global south, Facebook allowing people to transmit money, that would have enabled people in Africa and the global south to trade freely with each other. And that is something that the Western powers cannot have. So they shot it down. Next was Binance. Binance, with this great exchange and all this cash flow, started building out their wallet for the global south, all these on-ramps and off-ramps. Then he copied my peer-to-peer platform, and he came close to network state status. In fact, he actually achieved it. People were trading internally on Binance using Binance P2P. It was working. Now CZ's in jail. He'll be out soon, God willing. But he was too successful, so they shut him down. Now we're in round 3. I'm trying to make the next network state happen, and it's a pitched race between No One's, my company, Telegram with 1 billion users, and X. Third time's a charm, brother. I'm shooting for it all. But we are in the era of the nation state versus the network state. And we have to bring it all together and not make the same mistakes that we did in the past. Meaning, CZ made 2 mistakes. 1, he went for the American market. That opened him up. And 2, he didn't leave enough money on the table. He wanted to centralize everything and have control. I'm not making that mistake. So I've also started a decentralized open source protocol so that anyone can build their own peer-to-peer marketplace and compete with me. Everyone should be able to steal my idea. That's called CivKit, Civilization Toolkit, which I believe is the only way to make Bitcoin and a retail thing, and to make Lightning worth the damn thing at all. Working on a few other things, but those 2 are probably most important.
So wasn't Bitcoin supposed to fix this?
Yeah, it really was, man. That's what I thought. That's why I was Bitcoin only for like 7 years. I even excluded stable coins. But honestly, in the past few months, beginning of this year, I started seeing that this whole thing was hijacked. And it wasn't hijacked when Ray noticed. It was hijacked at least 2017, maybe earlier. And we see that now. I see it very clearly. I mean, the tactics that these maxi cultists use under the blockstream cronies, it's disgusting. These are the same tactics that the CIA uses, that all of these disgusting, destabilizing organizations use. Same exact playbook. And they've basically taken Bitcoin, deified Satoshi, and created this cult where it doesn't work. It is purposely handicapped, and you can't use anything else. Classic subterfuge and destabilization.
It is, and it's beyond sad to see. I've been talking about parts of this for the last hour. I think that I know I think 71% of the world lives on less than $10 a week. And, the whole point behind this originally was peer-to-peer cash that was cheap and available everywhere. And you have maxis now that laugh at this, that push for higher fees, that say things like "have fun staying poor," or "glad they can keep the pores out of the coin." So, I think that the behavior of the cult is worse than central bankers. I mean, you don't see Jamie Dimon even acting like Max Kaiser, right? It's like, well, we're going to make this the coin for this country, and you can only use a centralized version of it through a custodial wallet in El Salvador, and then we're going to ban everything else. I mean, this is completely off message. And what happened last week at this Bitcoin conference to me was quite possibly one of the most damaging things that's happened. The way I look at it is, it's not if Bitcoin was hijacked, it's how many times has it been hijacked, and what level are we at now? I mean, we're at the point where people are cheering on the government using civil asset forfeiture, stealing people's coins directly, and then using taxpayer theft to buy this coin. And all the while, no one's actually using it. It can't be used as a currency. So we've reached a new level. I look at it as our Bitcoin maxis. It's not enough that they want to make their coin the only coin out there, and they put people down and whatever. You can name call, you can use whatever propaganda and techniques you want. But once you start using the force of the state, and once you start taking people's money, that we've reached a new level here, I think, with this whole thing.
You sum it up well. They've become worse than the central bankers. It's like all these socially awkward nerds that no one wanted to talk to got some money, and now they're trying to outdo the bankers in status evil. It's absolutely disgusting. Like, we're supposed to accept these new overlords. It's despicable. And they're so forward and upfront about it too. The racism, the supremacism, the idolatry. It's just despicable. I've never seen anything like it. And I'm supposed to be a part of this movement. It's disgusting. It really is. It's a shame for everyone involved. I regret leading the people of the global South down this road. When we have to use other things, brother. So we should talk about alternatives. We got Bitcoin Cash, we have Monero, we have Litecoin, we have Xano. All of these projects are available that have real utility. And the reason I was Bitcoin only was I wanted to focus all of our energy and momentum on one clearing layer to deliver that out the door. Well, that's out the door now, not in a good way. It's a door slammed in our face. So we have to move on to something else. We have to combine forces here and get money moving around the world, because the medium of exchange is really the biggest problem in the world, especially for the global South. And people in the West, they might not be underbanked, but they're certainly overbanked. Banks bugging them at every single transaction, asking for an explanation. So everyone needs help. And yet these maxis put every single argument they put forward is complete rubbish. Oh, Bitcoin needs to achieve store of value first. It achieved that at $1. I mean, everything they put out is absolute tripe and garbage. So medium of exchange, brother, what are we going to do?
Well, I certainly agree with that. And my thinking has changed a lot, a lot this year. I mean, I've gone through a lot of, I spent a lot of time. It made sense to focus all of our energy on Bitcoin. When I got involved with Bitcoin in 2012, I mean, I was using it. There wasn't necessarily this need to have 20,000 different alternatives. You'd get network effects. There are a lot of reasons why it made sense to put energy behind one big project, even though it's decentralized, and obviously, and that didn't work out. One of the things, though, that conclusions I've come to in the last, I'd say, 90 days is the importance of potentially privacy by default. Like, that was not something that was a top issue for me. But when I look at it now, with what's going on, and part of it that affects me, and part of how I got to doing what I'm doing right now, is seeing friends of mine and people in my community here in New Hampshire get targeted by the federal government, thrown in prison. And this is a constant argument that you have with maxis online. I'm like, look, it's a surveillance coin. They can use chain analysis and AI to find out most people's transactions. And inevitably somebody jumps in and says, well, you don't know how to use it. You don't understand technology. I can keep my transactions safe. right? And the money should not have as a prerequisite 140 IQ and 15 years of development expertise. Money is a medium of exchange. It should be easy to use. It should be private. Everybody should be able to use it. And that and this is actually part of the mindset is there's this exclusivity of, well, it can be private. And by the way, even those people that say that it can be private, I mean, people like Ian Freeman and Roger, these are not stupid people. These are sophisticated people. Ross Ulbricht, the people that got involved early, the real OGs. A lot of people didn't realize necessarily that this chain analysis, they didn't know where this was going to go. I think some people thought it was more anonymous than it was. But most people can be identified. And then the next argument people say is, well, yes, so they identify me. But as long as I've memorized my 12 words, they can't get my money. Okay. They'll throw you in a cage. I mean, they have clearly shown a willingness. I've got friends. We know people that are in prison for this exact thing. And so your choice is, yes, you cannot give up your phrase. And what your contribution is that you're taking the supply out of Bitcoin. Like, where's the victory in all of this? And so I'm bringing this up just to say that I really have a renewed interest in privacy, and in part because I agree with this network state model, but I actually think that what's going on is what we're really up against is a global technocracy, a one world global technocracy. What they're building is a system where you have CBDCs and digital assets centralized on a country by country basis, but where those are interconnected so that at the end of this, you have one platform where CBDCs and digital assets can be tracked, monitored, and censored by multiple third parties at a central level. That's what we're competing against, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I don't know if you ever heard of Zbigniew Brzezinski. He was Henry Kissinger's mentor. He wrote a lot of great books. Most people know him for the great Grand Chessboard. But he wrote a book called Between Two Ages, and it was published in '69, I believe. And he also wrote a book about the technocratic, Between Two Ages, America's role in the technocratic era. That's what he called it. And everything that's happening now, he predicted. A real-time, open, circulatory system of all human value. That is what CBDCs will give them. Now, if I was a conspiracy theorist, or at least an astute observer, I would conjecture to say, Satoshi Nakamoto, this lone programmer, did all this himself. Maybe it was a conglomerate or a group of organizations working together to introduce this to the world in a way to innocuously launch it with this nerdy disguise, and knowing that they could control it. And in fact, they did. And the end game is, okay, we're going to corral all of this into a CDBC network of local and global centralized control, with Skynet sitting right at the top. And you already see it happening. The UAE is working with China and Saudi, and they have, their first CDBC system. It's already running. And you're going to see more of these corridors being created on these CDBCs. And even if these, global South BRICS nations manage to keep some form of independence on these rails, we all know that with enough political pressure, anything is possible, and all of this can be congregated into one place for whoever has, the iron gauntlet, whoever's wearing it, right? That's the world we're looking at.
What is the world we're looking at in particular? So there are 134 countries now at various stages of CBDC exploration, representing 98% of the global GDP. When you look at this, and this is what stunned me, because I'm like, well, why are they cracking down on crypto? And then I'm like, okay, they're cracking down on crypto because they don't want competition. They want to be able to roll out CBDCs, put people in it's not going to be here's an incentive where we're trying to motivate people. It's going to be, here's an emergency, take it or leave it. But in order for it to be take it or leave it, you have to eliminate the competition. And so I think that's largely what's been going on. But you have 5 groups: the UN, the WEF, Bank for International Settlements, the World Bank, and I believe I said IMF. But anyway, 5 of them that are working together. They exchange policy toolkits. They're working on technical standards. And in the case, for instance, of Nigeria, It's the World Bank and the IMF that in their traditional format, they go in and they use a combination of carrot and stick to push this. Nobody in Nigeria was asking for CBDC. Nobody. There was no organic interest in this.
And in fact, the people of Nigeria were the first nation in the world to completely reject CBDCs. They outrightly rejected it flat out. And that's very inspiring. I'm glad they did that. But like you said, with the right emergency, anything is possible. Even without an emergency, there are ways to introduce it. Like, hey, if I was an evil bad guy, I'd say, why don't we extend out people a credit line in this CBDC and relieve their suffering? Who would say no to that? They have so many avenues to introduce CBDCs.
Yep. I actually, my best guess from my research is that going back to Brzezinski in this whole technocracy thing, I mean, he didn't predict it, he created it, I would argue, in a certain way. In this whole technocracy thing started in the 1930s.
Yeah.
But the real purpose and the point of technocracy, their main thing, if I had to sum up what their goal is, it's to convert the economy from a price-based system to an energy credit-based system. So what they want to do is build a top-down system, command and control system, where energy credits are the currency, and where you have a social credit system that, if you look at the UN Agenda 2030, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, those are in essence the elements of a social credit system. And you can measure within those 17 goals what kind of behavior you would reward and punish based on the energy credit system being what confines all economic activity. And this isn't a theory. This is a horrifying thing. I don't know if you've seen this. It's a Doconomy MasterCard. There's an actual United Nations branded MasterCard. Has the UN on it, has a 13 on it. 13 represents the Climate Action Sustainable Development Goal. It's a credit card people sign up for that voluntarily shuts off when you hit too much carbon usage. MasterCard has formed relationships with 136 companies. They are already tracking carbon output to financial transactions and censoring your ability to access money. This already exists and people are already using it. And so this is kind of like, a lot of people like, these aren't really conspiracy theories. These organizations themselves are the source documents for this. They are building this. People don't want to admit that. So what do we do? How do we stop this? What's the way forward at this point?
Yeah, well, it all begins in the mind, right? So I think what really needs to happen is, people in the West need to become aware of what's going on here, that they are going to do to everyone in the West the same thing they've been doing to people in the global South. They don't want Africa to use fossil fuels because they know that'll allow them to develop. They want to keep them poor and underdeveloped. So shame, shame, shame on you. Gasoline, natural gas, no. Oil, no. Wood, no. Coal, no. You have to be green. And they're going to do the same thing to us in the West. All the white people are going to be hit with the same pain that all those black and brown people are. So we have to understand we're all in the same boat. We can't look down on them anymore. We are all, quote unquote, the N-word now. That is just the way that it is. We've been looking down on the global South for so long. Oh, yeah, they're poor because of low IQ and they're lazy. No, that is not the case. They are poor and they are, quote unquote, leaders are corrupt because all their good leaders keep getting killed. 60 African leaders have been assassinated in the past 70 years. They just drop like flies. They can't trade with each other. In Africa, the banks don't work across border. Remittances cost more in Africa than they do outside of Africa. Even the mobile money networks don't work across border. Even the cryptocurrency exchanges that get too big get locked down, like they disabled Pan-African trade on Binance P2P. That was the first thing the American government did when they took over Binance, and now they're dying a slow death. So there's this huge drive to make sure that the people of the global South cannot trade with each other, so they stay poor. And guess what? They're going to do the same thing to the West because they have made their goals very clear. 7-8 billion people? No, we don't need that many slaves. Let's get it down to some manageable number. You remember the opening line of Between Two Ages? It was one of the scariest things I ever read, and it really rings in my ear. He said, for the first, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Z-Big, said, for the first time ever in human history, it's easier to kill 1 million people than it is to manage 1 million people.
Yep.
People should listen to that again, because it tells you everything you need to know. This guy was the architect.
He was the architect, and so it's, you know, there aren't. I talk about this in my book. It's you know, the Trilateral Commission, which Brzezinski started with Rockefeller in, I think, 71 or 72. They drafted what was called the New International Economic Order, which the UN passed the following year. So this became UN policy. So they basically were formed. The next year, their policy and agenda was adopted by the UN. And when you track it, if you really look at it, the UN Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals track right back to that as the basis for it 50 years ago. I mean, this is actually, it really is a 50-year plan. And we actually know who the players are. There's, you know, people like to speculate as who they are, and you can actually find out who they are and where it started and what the ideology is. They don't care about our individual rights. They don't care about property rights. They don't even believe in free will. And unless you understand and respect that, you're not going to know what you're up against. And every time we run into some sort of problem or catastrophe, we're going to associate it, you know, we're going to say, well, it was just a few bad apples, or this was one particular instance that involved a couple of greedy people who made the wrong decisions. And that's not actually true. This is a very strategically, you know, calculated situation that we're running into. So knowing that this stuff has been shut down by Binance, you know, Binance and anything centralized. So how do we get around that? So I will say what I've been doing here is doing these workshops, and I'm trying to get people to just start using self-custody crypto for day-to-day transactions, whether it's crypto or physical gold. I use these gold backs, 1/1000th of an ounce. They have different denominations, or even physical silver. Just exit the system and start doing it with no third parties. You know, try to get out of exchanges and anything centralized, but it's a challenge. The gating item now in the US, now that only 0.4% of Americans have bought something in the last month with crypto, we have decreasing usage of crypto as currency. And the choke point seems to be there really aren't any point of sale systems. It's not easy for a merchant to be able to use and receive alternative payments. And part of it is that anything that you do through a company that's centralized, or through the app store, is subject to centralized points of failure. So now you have this situation of you have to make something open source, but then you also have to make it easy to use. And we're kind of, unfortunately, in a race against time, because our biggest enemy happens to be these BTC maxis that are pushing a completely different agenda regarding. They're not even pushing the use of cryptocurrencies. They're actually just pushing back at using their assets within the existing system. So this is the challenge that I have. So I guess I'm still going to do what I'm doing. I'm trying to build open source tools, but I'd love to hear how you think we might be able to work around this, or have the best possible chance, knowing that they will go after anything centralized, knowing that they can go after you, or they can go after me personally. How do we make this something that can survive an attack on an individual or a company?
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know they can cut the head off anyone, even if you have your own military, like Muammar Gaddafi, right? They can come and put all of NATO at you, and they can get you. They can get you in your home. They can get you in the shower. So, but they can't stop a swarm of locusts or an army of mosquitoes, right? That's what peer-to-peer is all about. It diffuses risk. So for my part, I'm also building a decentralized protocol, CivKit, Civilization Toolkit. It is built on Bitcoin with a Lightning node, but we'll expand it in the future. But basically allows anyone to create their own peer-to-peer marketplace. Anyone can create their own Amazon, their own Silk Road, their own eBay, their own No Ones, their own Binance peer-to-peer for anything. And they can trade with Bitcoin. We can add other currencies in the future. But this is what the world needs, because it's borderless and it's permissionless. Anyone can use it. Even the OFAC sanctioned nations can use it. You know, whoever on the planet wants to use it can use it if you're on the CivKit node. Doing this is actually extremely difficult, because you have to understand marketplaces are hard. Every civilization is two pillars. If you go to any village, it's always the temple or the church, the mosque, whatever it is, and the market, right? That is where people go every day. Right. So we got to get this market right. But getting a marketplace right in this day and age is a lot more complicated than just an order book and an escrow system, right? We already have those parts. But there are 3 ancillary structures that have to be there for it to work. Number 1, you need a reputation system of some kind, right? Reputation is incredibly important. And we know in the first version of Bitcoin Core, Satoshi Nakamoto actually had, a marketplace function in there with inventory, escrow, and even a reputation system. Now, it wasn't much. It was only 300 lines of code, but we saw where his head is at. And even if it was the NSA, who saw it, MI5, MI6, or whatever, clearly everyone knows what the people want to do is trade. So besides the reputation system and getting that right, which we actually built that into Certificate already. It's only command line right now. It'll be a full messenger client soon. There also needs to be a court system, right? If there's a dispute, and most disputes are about money, someone has to arbitrate. So you need a decentralized peer-to-peer arbitration system. That is hard. That is extremely difficult. That's even harder than Bitcoin, but I've done it twice over the past 10 years. So we're going to do it again. And then you also need some form of issuance, internal eCash, stable coins, whatever you want to, however you want to run it internally. So with those 3 ancillary services and a marketplace, you actually have, something real. That's why I called it Civilization Toolkit, because 99% of governance is about money, right? And people just want to trade. So I'm going to take my current company, No One's. I'm going to take the entire marketplace and build it on CivKit. I'm going to give away the front-end tools for the world and the back-end tools for the world, so everyone can come compete with me, and I will share my liquidity with them, because that is the magic about peer-to-peer. If you just let it grow, it'll make everyone richer. I'm not CZ and trying to control all the traffic myself. This is the only way we will build a resilient structure, because what these guys fear most, really, because you have to think they plan 400 years ahead, minimum 50 years ahead, absolute basic bare minimum 20 years ahead in these little black swans that they create. What they fear the most is something coming out of nowhere, disrupting everything, and they're not going to be able to move fast enough to bring it down. And that's what I want to happen. If all of these people, black, brown, yellow people, everyone starts trading and moving that money around and no one is able to stop it, they're not going to have an answer to that. That's going to create jobs. That's going to create wealth. That's going to make that money move around. And once that, that lifeblood of humanity, which is money, starts moving around, this dormant, paralyzed human body is going to rise up like a giant. And maybe we'll get on our 2 feet soon enough to squash this hideous, annoying, evil little goblin that's been stabbing us in the eyes and the balls for the past 2,000 years. That's all I'm doing.
So how do you handle the dispute resolution aspect? I'm curious about how you do that.
Yeah, so I've built internal dispute teams for the past 10 years, and it's hard. You have to train people to be financial detectives, arm them with all the tools necessary to detect fraud, analytics, machine learning. It's a hugely complex system, but we built up our system to be able to do that. But that's not enough. We can offer our moderators, but there should be a way where everyone in the world can potentially put up their own ad as a financial arbitrator or adjudicator. Oh yeah, I have experience in bank transfer trades in India. I know all about it. I know the idiosyncrasies and cultures of the market. I've done 54 disputes. I never lost an appeal. My price is, 25 rupees and 50 basis points. And put up your ad there as a truth oracle, and the system will look, for the best match and randomly choose the best person to be the moderator. That's essentially what it is. It's a marketplace of truth oracles. Now, the vetting for these people, coming in, and then, the reputation system is also going to have to be applied to them. There's going to have to be an appeals process built in that can mimic the 3-tier structure of the courts in America or the UK, etc. But it's all doable. It's extremely difficult, though. But the only person that could actually do this is someone who has designed it before in a centralized manner. So now we're trying to build it out in a decentralized manner. That is the one thing that we need for this thing to really catch, because no one is going to use this at scale for big transaction amounts unless there's some recourse. Like RoboSats is a great system. It's doing well right now, but because they don't have this, people aren't ever going to trade more than $1,000 on there. But once you have this, potentially dudes could be doing $100 million oil deals on this if they know there is some recourse available.
Yep. Oh, that makes sense. I know I've gone back and forth. I just discovered Zano recently. because I've been very interested in asset tokenization. I spent a lot of time playing around with Ravencoin, and have traded tokenized a bunch of gold, silver, art, a whole variety of different things, using that. And Zano to me is very appealing because it allows you to create privacy tokens and right within the wallet. So it takes about 30 seconds. So it's got Monero level privacy, but for the tokenization of anything, you can trade it directly within the wallet, peer to peer, without any third parties. There's already a marketplace. I actually just sold a gold back this morning on Zano, and they have escrow contracts. So again, with no third parties, so where you can actually trade, if I wanted to send you a baseball card, we could each put up $50, and then, when we're both satisfied, the funds are released based on mutually assured destruction. I think it's an interesting model. And so I wanted to just mention it because it sounds like I like the privacy aspects of it, and fundamentally the privacy aspects, but also the cost. It's very inexpensive.
Where can I find this marketplace? Is there a website? Is it through a client, or
what you can find? Well, it's crude. So understand they've been building the tech for 5 years, and basically the lead dev behind it worked on CryptoNote, the tech behind Monero. So there's like a long history behind the team and the project. They've actually just released mobile wallets that are friendly and easy to use, and they've just launched a marketplace, trade.zano.org. So you can go there now and look at it. It's pretty crude, but you download a companion wallet and you can interface and do basic trading. But there are other features that are going to be rolled out throughout the rest of the year that are going to enhance this even further. So I thought I'd bring it up just because my personal interest at this point is privacy, just because I think in the United States at this point, it's going to be very difficult to use crypto. It's going to be I think it's going to become more difficult to even use Bitcoin. I think that they're going to require you to register it, and it's going to be a disaster.
No, 100%. That's why I left, because I saw that the DOJ is declaring outright war against crypto, but not just crypto, but especially peer-to-peer. 50 local Bitcoin traders got arrested by the DOJ. One guy sold $1,000 worth of Bitcoin to somebody, and then the DOJ tried to get him and his wife 35 years each. Him and his wife, they had 2 children. Why? Because they claimed, there was some lottery fraud somewhere down the line right there. That's what Chainalysis said. They tried to get this guy for 30 and his wife for 35 years because he used her bank account. Absolute man. And this was like 6 years ago. It's only gotten worse since then. Like, there is no future for Bitcoin or crypto in the United States in any way that, resembles the original mission of what was intended to do. There just isn't. I hate to break it to people, but respect to what you're doing, trying to educate people. That always goes a long way, because at the end of the day, you can always vote with 3 things that matter: your money, your attention, and your feet. Right?
Yep. Yeah, it's the only way. We can't vote our way out. And I spent a lot of time talking about that. The political stuff, people are being led down pathways here. There's no, even if Trump comes out and says he's against CBDCs, the Republicans are putting in legislation on stablecoins that would give exclusivity to the banks, which is a backdoor CBDC. I mean, we're going to end up with we will end up effectively with CBDCs, whether they're issued by the central bank or by the banks themselves, but we will have programmable digital money that is a complete dystopian nightmare either way. And there is no freedom option. Freedom is not a choice at the ballot box at all. And so that's the issue.
Yeah. People have to understand, like, when Trump says, I will never allow a CBDC, like, it's a battle of inches. It doesn't make sense for them to come out, hey, here's CBDCs, use it or else. No, like, hey, they will sneak it in on you. It will have all of the characteristics and the traits of a CBDC while having a shiny wrapper that doesn't seem like it. Oh, it's just Bitcoin, or whatever they use. Because it's a battle of inches, and they can apply immense political pressure. And as long as they control the on-ramps and off-ramps, they control the amount of currency in circulation. That has always been the superpower, like Nathan M. Rothschild said. Give me control of the volume of currency in circulation, and I care not who makes the laws. Yep. Playbook has not changed.
That's very true. That's very true. So what's your key to adoption? What, how do you see this working, and how much time do you think we have?
We only have till 2030, bro. I mean, it used to be 2016, then they pushed back the timeline. But the fact that they're, quoting this date over and over, they've got all of their evil eggs waiting to hatch. They have thought this through. They've been preparing this for thousands of years. They know what the fuck they're doing, and they try to take everything into account, but they can't take everything into account because God is the best of planners. So we have till 2030. That's 5.5 years left to make this happen. So I've given up on the West. I don't think there's any form of real rebellion possible there. And I say that not because the people of the West aren't competent, because the West is so spiritually mutilated, maligned, and absolutely owned. Like, there is no spiritual will left to fight. In the 50s, we still had Christian values. We don't have that anymore. It's done. And the white man is now on the reservations. Okay, so forget about that. What are we going to focus on? Focus on the global South. I'm focused on the place with the most energy, where people still believe in God. I think the global South will be the last phrase, especially Africa, will be the last and freest place on earth soon. So I'm trying to make a lot of money, brother, a lot of cash flow, and I'm trying to make a lot of people a lot of money and a lot of cash flow, and all of that I'm going to take and I'm going to invest, not in some fancy place in Dubai, but I'm going to Africa. I'm going to build things there, because we can do a lot in 5.5 years. You'd be surprised how a small but aligned team, how much they can do if they're all facing the same direction. And they're fighting like their lives depended on it. Because our lives do depend on it. And our souls depend on it. And the lives and souls of our children and their children depend on it. Because there's no fucking way in hell that I'm going to bring children into this world to go through 1,000 years of some dystopian nightmare run by these fucking despicable little goblins, man. Fuck that, man. I'm holding it down, brother. I'm going for it. If we're going to go down, we're going to go down swinging. But I know we'll win. I really do believe we'll win. There is a lot happening right now. And all the resistance out there, people paying with their blood, it's buying us time to make things happen. Because these bad guys, they can't see everything. God is the best of planners. They might plot and plan, but he's got a better plan. And since COVID, he has been weaving the threads together, bringing together the right people in the right places. Once humanity gets a safe place where we can all be together and build without fear of destruction, things will move exceptionally fast. And, it doesn't have to be a physical place. It can be an online refuge, which is why I position No One's as almost like it's a nation state. It's a network state. It's a refuge where anyone can go. You can trade. Your money is no one's business but your own. Complete and total privacy on that level. But of course, we must decentralize it on open source software as quickly as possible. 5.5 years, brother.
Yep. Well, I wanted to sign up, but unfortunately, I'm in the United States. So.
Oh, shucks. Sorry.
So you're finding a lot of receptivity. I mean, I see your posts all the time. You seem like you're everywhere.
Yeah, I just got back from Kenya. I spoke about Pan-African free trade there. We had the first Pan-African free trade conference, and the protests broke out while I was there. And the government thinks I was masterminding. I wasn't. I was just speaking. But when I spoke to 7,000 students at universities and churches, the reception was beautiful. Because they're all like, "Wow, they got it. The banks don't work. The mobile money doesn't work. Even the cryptocurrency changes are being disabled. They don't want us to trade." But if every non-local business in Africa can accept payments from the other 55 states of Africa, that's at least a 10x increase in their business, which is going to mean a 10x increase in their jobs. And once they understood that, it took away that colonial virus that makes us think that we're not worthy or that we're somehow lacking. We're not lacking. We just have this parasite on our back that we need to remove the interference. And it filled people with a lot of hope. So I'm just going across Africa and I'm preaching the same message. There's nothing wrong with us. We just need to remove this interference. As long as we can trade with each other, we will fix all of our own problems. And everyone's very receptive to that. So I'm going to keep pushing the message, brother. And I'm going to do a lot more. And the more power and wealth that Allah gives me, the more good I will do and the more unity I will bring, God willing.
That's awesome. Wow. And that's an incredible message. I'm grateful that you're out there doing that. I mean, and we need it here too. I mean, I'm trying to do the same thing in a way, and it's I will tell you, like this, the idea of engaging in trade somehow is something you almost have to teach that concept in America, which is it's bizarre to me. And I will tell you, I think one of the things that I've been the most shocked by, and this is a challenge, is there's more receptivity to these ideas coming from boomers than there is coming from Gen Z.
Really?
In fact, it completely blew my mind. Was not what I expected. When I do these, I went to Silicon Valley, 100 people there. They say the average age was probably 60, right? These are boomers. A lot of them never touched crypto before. They were radicalized by COVID. They see what's going on with inflation. And it was in a church. It was actually in the church in California that defied all of the shutdown orders, got sued for millions of dollars. These are people that are like, no, we know we might not have understood the technical nuances of what was going on, but we're awake now and we're looking for a solution. That group was energized. That is not a group that, being in crypto, we would have ever in a million years thought would be a target audience. And these are people with means, by the way. These are people that actually have money, but they've never touched crypto. Because I do a little survey as I go through this thing. More people outside of the echo chamber have heard of Sam Bankman-Fried than Satoshi Nakamoto. I do a little poll on that. I do another poll. People don't know that you can use crypto to buy and sell things. They only know it as a speculative asset. But more on the encouraging side, the overwhelming majority of them are on board with the fact that we are fighting a plan for a one world global technocracy. They got that. They knew that. And for them, this is much more of a spiritual message. It works more with that group to talk about CBDCs as being the mark of the beast. They get that. So they might not know how to use a crypto wallet yet. And by the way, it shouldn't be hard to use a crypto wallet, but they are very, very receptive to it. But when you talk to younger people, and there was a Cato report on this, 35% of Gen Z polled thought that it was acceptable for the federal government to install security cameras in people's homes to monitor for domestic violence. There is not an understanding or an appreciation or a respect for privacy amongst young people in this country. This is part of the indoctrination that has gone on in schools. So yes, it literally, the target at which, on the one hand, I know who to go to. On the other hand, I don't think usually revolutions are led by young people. And so the fact that we actually don't have engagement or even a recognition of what the problem is from younger people, I have not been able to figure out how to address that. And I will say, even within crypto, how much of crypto is just meme coins and NFTs, right? We talk about tokenization, and people are like, I've had a lot of people say, well, who cares about tokenization? We don't need tokens. And it's like everything you trade is in a database. Right now, it's a centralized database. It's going to be moving. It could have moved to something like Bitcoin, where it's an open ledger for everyone. That's gone. No one, the incumbents didn't want that. So we're not moving in that direction. So now the choices are going to be, do you get a centralized ledger where all of your assets can be programmed and controlled, or do you opt for something else? But make no mistake, everything will be tokenized. It's just a question of whether you're going to get ownership of the token and privacy about that token. But younger people don't even necessarily start out with the disposition that privacy is something that they should have as a fundamental right. So that's part of what I'm struggling with here.
Wow. Yeah, that's the moral rot of the U.S., man. It's removed the fight out of the young people, which is, that's extremely alarming. Because I see a radically different situation in Africa. The Gen Z of Africa, look what the Kenyans did, bro. I mean, I thought the Kenyans, man, were like so polite, and they're very polite, civilized people. It's like, they're not mean enough to take down these central bankers. But man, they shut me up real good, bro. They got into the streets there. They raided the Parliament building. They started taking things down. And, the Gen Z of the Global South, they got the right stuff, brother, which is, I love what you do in the States. I would vote for you for president, my man. But, man, if you ever want to bounce to the Global South, I got you, bro. We need warriors like you.
I think I need to check it out. I mean, I'm at the point, I was telling somebody, I would never form another corporation in the United States.
Hells no.
Never. And I'm out there looking. I mean, I've got kids. I have 14-year-old twins. That adds a little bit of complexity to the situation. But I'm going to do everything that I can here. I think this is the last step. I think 2030 is at the latest. When you look at the adoption of CBDCs, I mean, I like to say to people, it's like 2030 is not when they're going to start doing this. 2030 is when they basically want to have the whole infrastructure already rolled out. And so they're putting these things in place piece by piece. So we've got to act now. And so many people that I talk to was like, well, what if they make that illegal? I'm like, look, so what I'm saying is I'm promoting voluntary trade. If they make voluntary trade illegal, is this something you're going to comply with? Like, at what point, like, so many people sit in fear of what they might make illegal that they shouldn't, from a natural law perspective, you should never even contemplate them being able to do this. And so much resistance is around. Fear works, right? Fear is how we get all of this. And we are definitely living in fear, but I'm excited to hear it. And I like following, your feed because it's very clear wherever you go, there's big energy. So there's no doubt about that. Yeah.
You made a great point. Like, we have to understand what their end goal is. With CBDCs, with the AI, with the robotics, their goal, simply stated, is to create a matrix of control where escape is not just impossible, it'll be unthinkable. That's what they want. And this has happened in the past. But every time these evildoers have managed to create this matrix of control where there was just nowhere to go, guess what? God would reset. These resets have happened. Look, I'm not trying to push religion in anyone's face, whether you believe in Islam or Christianity or Noah's flood or anything like that. But I used to be an atheist. And I came to the logical conclusion after a tremendous amount of research that guess what? All that ancient stuff, it's not fairy tales. It's all true. Whether it's in the Old Testament or the Vedas, whatever it is, these resets have happened. And they are trying to make it happen again. There is no way that these bad guys will win. Because even if they get what they want, there will be a reset. But it's not enough that they lose. We have to beat them. This is key, because this is a test of humanity. That's what a spiritual battle means. We are in this world. In Islam, they call it the dunya, which means the enjoyment of an illusion, a hologram, right? That's what it is. We are in this hologram to be tested by the intention of our deeds. The bad guys think, oh, humanity will fail. We're a weak creation. We got them before. We'll get them again this time. No fucking way. There are enough people now that are awake. And honestly, I look around the world right now and I see, I think it's like 999 out of 1,000 are NPCs. They're just, whether they lack the knowledge or they lack the emotional strength to accept the knowledge, they're just too weak, but we don't need them. Even 1 out of 1,000 is enough. That's 8 million people on the planet. We can win with that, and we must win.
You'd mentioned, I put out a post about kind of what radicalized you, and you said that you'd spent kind of 7 years in solitude. Just, you want to talk about that at all? I'm fascinated.
I'm happy to, honestly. Like, I was in my prime. I was like, it's like same age as Jesus, 30, 29. And I just started, waking up, going down one rabbit hole after the other. First, I figured out all the health stuff is a lie. Everything they're saying is bad for us is actually good for us. Everything they're saying is good for us is like poison. And the doctors are in on it. What's going on? And then I started, digging into the history. Like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And then I went on this 2-year bender of reading all of these revisionist history books, books that were banned in America and the West. And I just sought them out like a junkie. And I was just literally living by myself in my little shitty apartment in Hell's Kitchen. And I was just reading. I had no girlfriend. I did not get laid for 7 years. Literally all I did was work out and read and work on my startups, making enough to keep going, failure after failure, but I still managed to survive. My failures did make some money to keep me going. And I just read, and after I fell down the history rabbit hole, I saw, man, they're lying about everything. The bad guys are the good guys. The good guys are the bad guys. The good guys lost the war. Oh, man, and it fell down another one. I was like, wow, okay, the religion too. But it was when I fell down the RAS rabbit hole that I really got devastated. And it took me about 2.5 years, which was the science. Throughout all of this, I was feeling like Neo in the Matrix. And I was like, man, everyone here believes the exact opposite of the Bible. I can't talk to any of them, but at least I still believe, man, science is legit, right? I mean, you can prove that, natural observation, all that scientific method. Yeah. Then I fell down this science rabbit hole and I saw this is an even bigger lie than everything else. It is complete madness. They basically managed to wipe out the real science, and it really happened somewhere around the 1920s, and replace it with complete and total rubbish, with a cult, just like BTC maximalism, this whole relativity, special relativity, quantum this, quantum that. They replaced the real science of the Victorians, which was in the day called natural philosophy, right? That's what Isaac Newton called himself, a natural philosopher. So did Nikola Tesla. So did Nikola Tesla's heroes like William Crookes, like all the great ones of the Victorian Institute. I mean, the Royal Society. And that's like when I discovered, who Tesla's heroes were and this whole Royal Institute. That's when I disappeared for 5 years, bro. 5 fucking years, man. All I did was read these old books of these Victorian scientists. That's all I did, man. And these guys wrote in English, and they were geniuses, bro. This Royal Institute was like, it's inconceivable. Like, it was like 100 super geniuses walking around the Royal Institute in London, bro. The remnants are in Mayfair. Even the guy like scrubbing the toilets, man, was a super fucking genius. So it slapped the shit out of any of these clowns running around today, like Neil deGrasse Tyson or whatever, Michio Kaku, whatever the hell his name is. These guys are all rubbish. Like, you had guys like J.J. Thomson. This fucking guy, this Scotsman, bro, people don't even know his name, but he was the greatest experimental scientist ever. Can you imagine doing an experiment in 1889 to ascertain the difference in the size of the nucleus of an atom to an electron? And he won a Nobel Prize for discovering the electron, and his son won a Nobel Prize, and all 7 of his research assistants won Nobel Prizes, guys like Rutherford, who gave us the entire modern age. These were the dudes that created all the science that we have now, and everything that they believed, including the concept of the ether, was wiped away and replaced with rubbish. There was that Joe Rogan interview with that actor, Terrence Howard, and he got into a little bit of this, but I went far deeper than him. Like, I really absorbed all of this. I really figured out what Tesla believed, because I read all the books he read, and I figured out who his heroes were, and I read his stuff. Bro, at the end of all that, I saw, okay, everything in science is a lie. I was very able to separate the difference between engineering and that thin little membrane where it goes into the theoretical gobbledygook crap, which is total shit. And what it made me see was, wait a minute. If your motive is just profit, why would you have to lie about all of this? Like, you could still make a tremendous amount of money if this technology was in play. I know I could, but no, because it would literally unlock human potential. Like, Tesla's last discovery was something called radiant matter. He basically figured out how to take electricity from the wall and transform it into a kind of natural organic electricity, which if you were to pump into the ground, through a very powerful ground antenna, which is what is at Wardenclyffe. It wasn't just that wooden tower. It was a massive dendritic copper and root network into the ground. You could literally channel into the ground, pick it up at all these receiving stations. And if there were 10 of them, you get 10 times as much power without losses. But the Earth would really replicate the power. Can you imagine, mining electricity and sending it around the world without losses, and it would replicate itself, and you could do the same for data as well. It would free the entire world. Centralized control would be gone. These were the things he was working on. All the other guys around were working on things just as amazing or more amazing. And it's like, my goodness, like, there is a spiritual operating motive. Someone out there hates humans. Who is that person? And then that's what made me realize, you know what? I was calling myself a believer of God all this time, but I was really putting science above God. And then that's what made me really dig deep. And that's where it really began my journey as a Muslim. And, going through all those religious texts with a new eye. So yes, brother, that was 7 years of complete and total monk-like solitude. And I paid the price, and I'm just wondering how to, in fact, I'm working now on bringing a lot of those products back slowly. I have some interesting projects, which I'll be introducing soon. But yeah, that's a small taste of that.
Yep. Well, that's all. I mean, I went through not quite as intense, but I actually went through kind of a similar process in 2019. Because I used to be an atheist, objectivist. I ran the Ayn Rand Institute, so I was as hardcore on that side of things as possible. And it was the same thing. I'm kind of like, well, everything around me is bullshit, but was still holding on to that kind of this materialistic view of the world, and that science is actually what it's presented to be, and realized that wasn't the case, and went down the Tesla rabbit hole as well. And Rockefeller did a lot of damage in terms of medicine, health, education. There's a lot of stuff that came out right at that time where basically the institutions that we have that are the factories of misinformation and that reduce people, basically shut off people's, I'd say, right brain, I guess, if any way of looking at it. Anything that could be done to shut down our ability to tap into source, if you will, seems to have emanated from that point in time. And I find it interesting, even something like patents. That's some interesting things. Trump's uncle or whatever was the one who, when Tesla died, and I'm sure you know this, it was Trump's uncle that went to his hotel room and apparently took whatever remaining inventions that he had, and who knows what actually happened with that. But we have something here called the Invention Secrecy Act, which over 5,000 patents in the U.S. have been suppressed using the Invention Secrecy Act. And essentially what they can do is this. It's not a very high standard. Each department has the flexibility to say, well, this is either a national security threat or an economic security threat. And so when a patent comes in that basically has technology that is too energy efficient or that threatens the existing status quo, they shelve it. And then the inventor has an immediate 10, 20 years in prison if they even talk about the invention. So we are living in a world where our understanding of science has been deliberately misrepresented, and where life-saving inventions have been shelved. And now we've been made to believe that we live in a society based on scarcity, based on fear, based on centralization, and determinism, and the exact opposite is true. So I went through the same journey, just not to the same extent. But I hear you. And helping people. Once you go through that, you can't go back. But then it's hard to communicate with people because you might look nuts.
Yeah, bro. Even the flat Earth people think I'm crazy. The Earth is not flat, by the way. There's two polar stars. It can't be flat, but they hijacked, these flat earthers 90 degrees of the way, and they made them believe this rubbish, mostly so they could, humiliate Christians and Christianity. But when you see how the PSYOP works, it's just disgusting. They managed to completely wipe out the world of energy and replace it with this very mechanistic, dead way of thinking where you have to burn something to do anything. This is what Rudolf Steiner talked about. He called it the Arlamonic. Right after the Asura Mazda, the villain, the counter deity to Asura Mazda, the Sumerian of Arlamon, these evil mechanisms. Anyway, brother, yeah, that's a deep topic and a deep rabbit hole. But rest assured, everyone, if you're listening to this, exercise the 180-degree rule in everything, not just history and politics, but also, especially, the quote-unquote science. It's a madness, right? Like, even math, like, how can you put math, which is a second-order power meant to model physical objective reality, over a first-order power like reality itself? Like, what? When you have when you go through enough of this original literature, you grow a pair of balls because you understand, like, these motherfuckers talking like Neil, they're stupid, they're dumb, man. They are fucking dumb. We are all smarter than these guys. All you have to do is just think rationally without fear. It's only they managed to impose the weight of this entire cauldron of lies that just gets people from talking. Then they'll scribble some equations on the chalkboard. Look, the math proves it, man. Fuck you and your mathematics, bitch. That shit doesn't make any fucking sense. Go fuck yourself. Anyway, it takes some time to develop that kind of confidence, but hopefully I stay alive. Just remember, I would never kill myself.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, listen, I know it's late there. It's like, what is it, midnight there?
I'm a night owl, bro.
Or night
I'm
out.
gonna go work out, do a leg day after this. We have to be strong, everyone. Can't just be smart. You have to be strong as well. Otherwise, we'll have our fighting done by fools and our thinking done by cowards. And that's what got us into this mess, everyone.
Very well said. Very well said. Well, anything else you want to anything you want to say? Where can people find you? And any closing thoughts?
Yeah, well, you can find me on Twitter. I'm Ray No One's on Twitter. I'm pretty accessible throughout social media. I'm still Ray Certificate on Instagram, but yeah, you guys can find me. I'll be doing a lot of great stuff out there, some very new projects. But by and far, the most important thing we can do right now as a civilization is we have to take back control of the two pillars of power that they took first, which is first is the money, and then the information. First, they took control of the money, and with that, they bought media control. And with that, then they bought political control, which is military control. And they keep resetting the world after these wars. We're in round 3 right now. So we see X has been co-opted. Elon Musk is a spiritual weakling. He's not one of the fucking good guys. It is a honeypot for literally the worst elements in the world. Do not trust this guy. He's another fucking clown. So we have to build our own systems. I'm trying to do it as well with No One's and Civkit. And I encourage anyone out there to try to do the same. We need to give people a way to communicate. And honestly, money is just a way to communicate value. It should be no different and no harder than sending an emoji. That's really what we're going to have to build. So I'm in the process of doing that now too. Please do wish me luck and say, give me your prayers. I would appreciate that. But one of the biggest messages that I'm putting out there, and it's important, it's the message of Pan-African trade. When I go and I talk to people, I'm talking about this. I'm not talking about my platforms. I'm trying to raise my revenue. I'm trying to educate people. The reason all these Black people are poor is not because of low IQ. It is because they cannot trade with each other. And it is imposed on them by the West, by the evil people that control the West, and they are imposing it on the West as well. They might be underbanked, but guess what? We're overbanked in the West. It is the same virus. They want us all to be poor, to stay in our 15-minute cities, and to not be able to use our money. They want full spectrum dominance. They've been doing it to our Black, brown, and yellow brothers and sisters, and they will do it to us. Because remember, if you're white, they don't like you either. In fact, they're especially fearful of you, and they're planning your demise. Believe it, folks. It's going to happen unless we stand up and unite right now, especially Christians and Muslims who share the same Messiah. And anyone that says differently is a fool and extremely dangerous, especially in this time. Say your prayers, everybody. You're going to need them. I'm praying on time. Encourage you all to do the same. Stay strong.
Awesome. Well, you got my support, man. Thanks for coming on, and I hope we can do it again.
Anytime, bro. You got a good riff going, man. Good chemistry. Smash it out. People need to hear this message. They need to hear the spiritual side of it with the utilitarian side of it. They both come together. The spirit world and the physical world work together. There's no way around it.
I agree. Awesome. All right. Well, have a good one. Thank you.
All right. Peace, brother.